Welcome back everyone to GGN. This is part 3 for this news report for today for Wednesday, August 14th, 2013. Alright, I'm ready to continue here, and I'm going to cover kind of conspiracy news, Big Brother technology. This first article or story I have for you is actually a video, but I'm not going to play it because YouTube just gets their panties in a twist if anyone who starts talking about truth puts this stuff out there. You know, you can put a whole movie or you can put a whole song on there of Rihanna, but you know, God forbid you actually try to inform people. Then all of a sudden it's a copyright issue. So hacker taunts child over baby monitor. So it was a terrifying experience for the parents of the two young children after their baby monitor was hacked. What the hacker did next was even more disturbing. The story has a creepy factor as the father in Northwest Harris County says he and his wife had heard a detached voice saying sexual things to their 2-year-old daughter, and it was coming from her room. For 2 years, the husband and wife have come to rely on their internet cameras. We almost couldn't live without it. He says with them, they could watch their 2 toddlers in their room. So convenience, right? But over the weekend, someone else was watching too. I felt like somebody broke into our house as the father. He said, wake up, Allison, you little expletive. So he said, and soon he knew it was coming from the camera. I see the camera move on us. Moved on us. He immediately pulled the plug, starting to do research, and he believes someone hacked his router as well as the camera. The person could see his Allison's name on the bedroom wall to call her by it. Here's some irony. The only saving grace is that the daughter never heard a thing. She was born deaf and has cochlear implants, so thankfully we had them off and she didn't hear any of it, and she slept right through it. So hackers, right? Feds turn to hackers to defend nation in cyberspace. So there you go. They glorify hackers in movies a lot and stuff like that, but a lot of times they end up going to work for the complex, the military, the intelligence, industrial complex, or Anonymous, which I think is an intelligence front. There's probably some good hackers out there, but a lot of times you go for where the big money is, and you go to work for the man. So hacking your life, a worst case scenario for implanted medical devices, says it couldn't happen, but suppose it did. It's straight out of an episode of Homeland. Terrorists hack an implanted medical device and use it to administer a lethal shock to a patient carrying it inside them. It says, as it turns out, hacking implants like pacemakers and insulin pumps is definitely possible. I just covered that about that. I think he was actually a hacker, or he was in the field basically, and I think he was even killed or arrested. But he was coming out, and he was killed. He was supposed to do basically a conference at DEF CON and talk about how pacemakers can be hacked and people can use it to kill people. So insulin pumps is definitely possible, and device manufacturers have known about it for years. It says it's taken a small cadre of computer hackers to show the public what companies like Medtronic dismissed as very remote possibilities, large-scale device tampering leading to thousands of injuries and death. So they said medical device manufacturers didn't pay much attention to digital security when constructing their implantable devices. The second part of the problem is increasing dependence on wireless communication for these medical devices to manage patient vital signs and know when to dispense medication. So, and that's actually what that individual was talking about, the pacemakers using wireless frequencies. Also, they just talked about there were some, I believe they were from MIT, but it could have been one of those universities. They were doing research, these students, and they basically proved that they could somehow change GPS signals by hacking and using wireless frequencies. So this, I guess he's a hacker. Barnaby Jack poses with a transmitting device he created that can locate insulin pumps and take them over. Via MIT, encryption is less secure than we thought. So, but you can go in there and type that in and read the whole article. It says wireless card readers used in many keyless entry systems may not be as secure as previously thought. One researcher said, we thought we'd established that the basic premise that everyone was using was fair and reasonable, and it turns out it was not. They say, but in cryptography, the real concern isn't with the average case, but with the worst case. It's still exponentially hard, but it's exponentially easier than we thought. Saying you'd be surprised at how quickly you can guess stuff. Hostage killed in Louisiana bank standoff. Gunman killed after shooting 2 hostages. So this was in Louisiana, and it says here that he robbed a bank and shot two of the remaining hostages, killing one of them before being shot and killed by police. Now this is interesting. The suspect, 20-year-old Fuad Abdu Ahmed, so maybe a Muslim, who knows. But it says he was going to kill the hostages. Then they entered the building just before midnight, and they said that he was mentally unstable, who believed a device had been implanted in his brain. Among his demands was the police remove the device. So there you go. He was mad at people that he said were mean to him, and said he had voices in his head. I sure hope they do an autopsy and look for any devices in his brain implanted. The CIA might be doing some experiment to be able to control suicide bombers. So, or someone said that he believed a device was implanted in his brain, yet he had a gun. When I connect the dots, I see lack of gun control and need for more regulation. It's not rocket scientists. Brain implant could turn you into one of the X-Men from August 13th, so it might sound like a popular comic book series like the X-Men, but scientists at Duke University are experimenting with a brain implant device that can make things possible in the real world, so you don't need to be born a mutant. Talking about imagine this, TSA agents enhanced with senses of smell, emergency responders that can hear sounds clearly from beneath the rubble and dirt, and cab drivers always knowing the direction of true north. They're talking about the research. I covered this a while back about teaching mice to recognize LED when they lit up. The mice learned to poke their noses into a appropriately related hole. So, talking about infrared cameras attached to their heads and wired into their brains where sensory processing occurs naturally. So, when they were exposed to the infrared light, the camera would stimulate the brain, becoming stronger, and the mice got closer to the infrared light and looked in this direction. So, and the way it works, we all know this, that first it'll be used for military, and then it'll be used for the elites, and then it'll trickle down in some kind of consumer-based product for the sheeple, so that it can be used to control them and manage them, spy on them. So, your thoughts can release abilities beyond normal limits from Scientific American. Our cognitive and physical abilities are in general limited, but our conceptions of nature and extent of those limits may need revising. In many cases, thinking that we are limited is itself a limiting factor. There is accumulating evidence to suggest that our thoughts are often capable of extending our cognitive and physical limits. This is what these psychologists did. One group were told that before each question, the answer would be briefly flashed onto their screens too quickly to actually consciously perceive, but slow enough for their unconscious to take it in. The other group was told that the flashes simply signaled the next question. In fact, for both groups, a random string of letters, not the answers, was flashed. But remarkably, the people who thought the answers were flashed did better on the tests. Expecting to know the answers made people more likely to get the answer right. Then you have from MIT again, the era of ubiquitous listening dawns. The Moto X, a new smartphone from Google's Motorola Mobility, might be remembered best someday for helping to usher in the era of listening. So unlike earlier phones, the Moto X includes two low-power chips whose only function is to process data from a microphone and other sensors without tapping the main processor and draining the battery. So this brings us closer to having phones that continually monitor their auditory environment to detect the phone owner's voice, discern what room or setting the phone is in, or pick up the clues from background noise. It can make it possible to detect your moods, know when you're talking, and not to disturb you, and perhaps someday keep a running record of everything you hear. Google says if you use Gmail, you have no legitimate expectation of privacy. So it says here in a motion filed last month, Google in a class action lawsuit dismissed. Google lawyers reference a 1979 ruling holding that people who turn over information to third parties shouldn't expect that information to remain private. Consumer watchdog Privacy Project director said in a news release, people should take them at their word. If you care about your email correspondence privacy, don't use Gmail. A report says IBM developing a computer system that thinks like a human. We just talked about that, about a supercomputer actually running and simulating the brain, but that was only for, only like a second or so. So researchers had built a computer simulator programming language and a series of applications and algorithms designed for computing on the level of human brain. It says, believe it or not, that sentence is not the plot setup, here we go, for a post-apocalyptic science fiction movie, at least not yet. It's funny that they keep saying that, but it says it's the latest development coming to IBM's research lab. And, of course, that's, DARPA and your tax dollars paying for it. Neuromorphic adaptive plastic scalable electronics. Nice, huh? It's what the investigator at IBM Research called a very modest goal of creating a brain-like computer. So, talking about how they always say this is not something out of a film or a comic book or a sci-fi movie, the reason is they put all that in that predictive programming is what it's really called, into literature and movies and entertainment to prepare people for what's coming. It's called an agenda. It's actually called a conspiracy theory. Yes, they do exist. U.S. to standardize car application communication device components. The Department of Transportation wants what it calls a 4-layer approach to connected vehicle devices and application certification. So high hopes of standardizing the way automobiles talk to each other and with other intelligent roadway systems of the future. They're using public and private researchers to help build what they call a hypothetical 4-layer approach. So this is about, oh yeah, look at this. U.S. to drive 3,000 Wi-Fi linked vehicles in massive crash avoidance trial. So it sounds nice and everything. This is highly controlled. It's highly controlled. The idea is to develop certification ensures that different components of intelligent travel systems that are manufactured according to connected vehicle technology, kind of like every car after 1996 has to have a black box. It says here that vehicle technology requirements will be trusted by the system and by the users, the Department of Transportation said. Here's where it gets kind of interesting, if it hasn't been already. Sleep drugs under a gun for doing job too well, so FDA is cracking down. So you need the FDA is cracking down on drowsy drugs that affect drivers. So it says here that the recommended dosage for sleep aids in an effort to stop people from zonking out on their morning drive to work. Now it's cracking the whip. So they push manufacturers to for more extensive driving tests. Again, testing themselves like Monsanto. It says it's different for men and women because tests showed women stayed drowsier longer. Then that brings you to this story. New Zealand woman drives for 190 miles asleep at the wheel. So it says here, while sending text messages from her mobile phone along the way. Told that the woman had been sleep driving for 10 months previously and had fondness for the beach, police ordered patrol cars to keep a lookout for a silver hatchback and began tracking her via a mobile phone after police received an emergency call from a friend concerned that she had gone out in her car after taking sleeping medication. It says after 5 hours on the road, she was finally found slumped over the wheel of her car in the driveway of a house she used to live in with no recollection of her sleepy sojourn. Werner Herzog made a documentary about texting while driving, and it's haunting from 1 second to the next. It's an unlikely film. Below came together when AT&T approached a German filmmaker and asked if he would direct a series of short films warning people about the dangers of texting while driving. He said it connected with him. He says there's a completely new culture out there. I'm not a participant of texting and driving or texting at all, but I'll see that there's something going on in civilization which is coming with great vehemence at us. So I'm going to check this out. This guy is awesome. I like him as a filmmaker. Herzog emphasizes the change in civilization he perceives as a part of examining an incident or accident in which an Amish family was killed and another in which a horse shoer's truck was involved. So yeah, here you go. They got the 34-minute one right there. Just type in this, pause it, and type in that, and you'll be able to find it. 9 pharmaceutical drugs that can cause chronic fatigue. So you probably know at least half the people you know that are on this, especially if you're older, over 40. Blood pressure medications. Type in this headline: to some truckers, DOT rules to combat fatigue are tiresome. So making the argument that these rules against truckers as far as combating crashes due to fatigue are really hurting them. And pharmaceutical drugs that can cause chronic fatigue, including blood pressure medications, statin drugs, this benzo, I don't even know what they are, pines, to treat anxiety disorders, proton pump inhibitors for digestive problems, antihistamines, especially with allergies, to make you tired, antipsychotic medications, antidepressants, antibiotics, and diuretics. Sansom workers are given 32 seconds to assemble their mobile phone. As a Chinese woman is left with a scratched eyeball after her iPhone 5 exploded after heating up during a 40-minute call. Last month, it was claimed an air stewardess was killed by an electric shock when she answered the call on her iPhone 5 when it was recharging. Bill Gates' new idea would bring textbooks to life. The proposed tech automatically generates video from text. This is GGN. Thank you.